Last time on the WizardCast.
All right, you ready, Brian?
What is this?
Hey, Brian, are you sure this is a good time to record?
Yeah, I'm just watching the kids. They're getting into everything.
No, put the blender down.
We could do this at a different time, man. You know, don't have to do it now.
No, we have to have an episode out. It's due Monday, and we need to get something out.
So no. Don't touch that chainsaw, mister. No, put it down. I said put it down.
That's seriously, man. I could do Thursday.
Yeah, no, they'll be fine. They just have to get it out of their system.
No, don't you dare. Don't you turn on Quick Rate. What have I told you about Quick Rate? No, not a multi-pick list. No, that's naughty. No.
Okay, this could be a while.
And now the conclusion of the WizardCast.
I'm Brian Kwong.
And I'm Mark Ross.
We're Salesforce experts that love talking about technology and Salesforce.
We also love humor. Doesn't mean we're actually good at it.
In the Salesforce community, I'm known as the Salesforce Wizard, likely due to me wearing a wizard hat at Salesforce events.
And I'm known as Salesforce Yoda for pretty much the same reason.
You should see the ears.
We have a passion to help educate and entertain people.
So we've joined forces to create WizardCast.
We've got tips and best practices.
We talk with interesting people.
All mixed with quote-unquote jokes and humor.
Welcome to the WizardCast. When is a farmer like a wizard? When he turns his cattle to pasture.
Ooh, yeesh. Well, at least you found a joke that lines up with our topic, sort of.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, there's just not a lot of jokes about silos to be found. So we're going to skip our actual content and we're going to start interviewing farmers.
That seems quite off topic and not actually at all what we talked about.
I'm trying to match the joke to the content, and since I couldn't find an appropriate joke to the content we have, I'm changing the content.
You're also changing the script, but
don't we always do this?
You know what, Brian? Didn't you do something with artwork lately? Wasn't there a big change that you made?
Well, people who may be coming to the website, thewizardnews.com, or looking at their podcast app may know we have a brand new logo.
It's spiffy. It's clean. It's
made professionally by someone that wasn't me.
And less likely to cause copyright infringement.
Yes, absolutely. And we also have new artwork that's visible on our Twitter page, our Facebook page. Yeah, check it out. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I know my professional opinion. My review right here now is me likey.
Yeah. I actually went ahead and uploaded those photos to the merchandise store. So now I can go to buy little notepads with their logos on it or coffee mugs.
Oh, that's adorable.
It's cute.
Yeah.
So it's November. It's cold.
Oh man, it's getting bad already.
Yeah. It's down in the 20s already. It's not even 10 o'clock.
Oof.
So we're going to go back to warmer times. July to be specific.
Ooh.
Yeah, so during MidWest Dreamin, this last July, we had the distinct honor of talking with Peter Coffee for over an hour.
Oh, yeah.
So we split the conversation into 3 episodes. Our first episode, which was number 76, we talked about admins being the stewards of change at their organization. The episode after that was episode 78, and we had a great discussion about experience design. You're going to find both episode links in the show notes. They're definitely worth a listen. The episode we're going to do today is the last bit of the conversation where we're going to be talking about busting silos. And, Mark, do you think this is really appropriate? It's kind of violent for a podcast. I mean,
what are you talking about?
Well, we're talking about busting up some poor farmer's silos. I mean, it's not exactly clean for the ratings. I mean, shouldn't we do something a little bit more wholesome?
No, Brian, it's not about actual bust. No, wait, why am I explaining this to you? You were there when we talked to him about it.
Was I?
I have documented proof that we did. In fact, it's going to come up right right now.
Another phrase that comes up a lot is what we call silo busting, and that sounds like more fun than it is, probably. If you walk into any organization today, retail banking is a good example. I'll ask, if I have a checking account, a savings account, a retirement account, a car loan, a home loan, and an educational savings account for my kid, how many of me do you know? And they look at my upraised fingers and they say, well, at least 5 or 6 of you. Because most retail banks have products, and you have an account in the space of that product, and your identity is as a checking customer, a savings customer, an IRA customer, whatever.
Well, and that may be 5 different Salesforce orgs.
It could easily be. And the notion of unifying their view, even of you as a single individual, many are proud to say, now we have a 360-degree view of their customer. I don't know if you've ever been in the room when I have, at this point, pulled out a 360-degree circular protractor and said, oh, like this, and then turned it edgewise. Because the 360-degree view of a single individual is grossly inadequate if you fail to understand that they're a member of a household. If they're an affluent middle-aged person, they probably are also a financial caretaker for aging parents and a financial custodian for children, and maybe a giver of advice to family and to other family and friends. And if you fail to appreciate those roles, then the 360-degree view in which you're taking so much pride is a razor-thin slice of the reality that customer represents. And so the same conversation can be had in almost any environment. If I walk into a city government, I can say, look, you've got public safety, bridge, road, and tunnel maintenance, taxes and licensing. If I walk into higher education, I can say, look, you've got admissions, academics, dining and residency, and alumni affairs. And you talk to these people and you say, here you are in higher education. You probably spend more money on identification and acquisition of a customer than any other industry in the world, and at the end of 4 years you throw the customer away and invite them to send money as a voluntary gesture of gratitude for the rest of their lives. How broken a model is that? How can you possibly be failing to create the opportunities to be an ongoing member of an active community of knowledge and collaboration? I mean, even University of Phoenix, a for-profit, largely online offering, promotes the notion that by graduating from there, you become part of a community that's going to be a professional advantage to you for the rest of your life. Isn't that a remarkable thing? And so our higher education event at Salesforce has grown from 200 people attending it 5 years ago to last year when we had over 2,000. Because from every level, from K through 12 up through the most elite universities, they are all starting to understand that their understanding of who their customer is and of the multi-decade journey that their customers are on is literally a 400-year-old business model if you go back to Oxford University, which arguably had a more personal connection with its students than the modern university does, and that there's never been a time when that model was more open to and demanding of a reinvention for 2 reasons. One, the perception is no longer that the college degree is an automatic admission ticket to an affluent middle-class lifestyle. It's now regarded by many people as an admission ticket to a high-debt, low probability of career success lifestyle, and they need to fix that big time. And number 2, people are going to live longer, work longer during a period when knowledge turnover is faster, so you're going to need the equivalent of 4 or 5 bachelor's degrees to get through a working career now. And that means that the notion of college as a 4-year portal through which you pass, and on the other side is your adult life, and you're just an alum. I'm sorry, the notion of continuous learning has to be a new thing. And so silo busting in higher ed, silo busting in government. Here's an example. The city of Hamburg. It's a port. It makes its living by how much cargo can move in and out through the city, on and off the ships. That's what it does, okay? Anything that's tying up the streets that's not a cargo truck is atherosclerotic plaques in the arteries of the city, okay? Well, if you've got a garbage truck emptying a half-full bin, it's wasting space in the street. How do you avoid that? Well, you could put sensors in the bins, but then you have to have someone from the waste removal function driving around and checking the sensors. Well, here's an idea. The police cars are driving around patrolling anyway. How about putting sensors in the police cars to check the state with near-field communication as they pass the garbage bins so that we can map in real time the optimal garbage collection paths for the following day? You want the police cars to be checking the levels of trash? We don't do that. We're public safety professionals. I mean, there's a massive silo busting effort that's cultural as much as it is technical. Getting the different city departments to stop jealously guarding their turf and identity and become collaborators in the multi-system process.
Right.
You know, multi-systems. 60 Minutes did a really interesting story a while ago about a friendly fire incident in which American forces on the ground were bombed by American planes. The Americans on the ground were wearing on their helmets infrared strobes that are supposed to signal that they're friendlies to the American planes flying overhead. Everyone believed that the planes could detect and be aware of those strobes. They were wrong.
Oh, wow.
The planes had systems that were supposed to detect friendlies on the ground. The friendlies on the ground had systems that were supposed to alert the planes. There was a critical gap between two particular systems, and the result was people died. System unification across the silos that naturally emerge from technology and from habit and culture is a huge opportunity. And when people ask me, what's something I could do tomorrow that would advance the cause of adoption of something like a Salesforce solution in my organization, among the things you can do is go visit a piece of your company in which you don't know anybody and find out what they do and how they do it, and begin a process of breaking down a wall between two silos, and then keep doing it. You know, form round bag sessions with names like Customer Success Development Project or whatever. This is also something I urge for underrepresented groups like, you know, women and minorities in organizations.
Right.
Don't wait for the job to be posted. Start a group to solve a problem and let the recognition that this is a good idea nucleate around you. Don't wait for the invitation. And silo busting initiatives don't begin from inside any of the silos. They begin by someone deciding to break a hole through a wall, and the owner of the wall usually is not the person who takes the lead in doing that, because they get budget and headcount to build a bigger, faster, more powerful silo. Mm-hmm. They aren't normally handed a budget to break down the boundaries of their organization. They're handed a budget to strengthen, which actually means to make the silo walls thicker in some ways, the organization. And so among our most important challenges is to be having conversations at the CEO and CTO level, because I guarantee you, if I bring a cure for world hunger to a person whose job is selling, he's not going to say, oh, good, now I can cure world hunger. He's going to say, how do I use this to improve my sales? That's because that's what they're going to be rewarded for doing. And so turning the conversation around into one that's about things that aren't normally considered your job, and being prepared to deal with people who say, I'm sorry, you know, is this your job? Or, I'm sorry, who authorized this? You need to develop a certain degree of constructive deafness to questions like that. If someone asks a question you don't want to answer it, don't. This is actually part of Salesforce PR training. If you don't like any of the answers you could give to a question, answer the question you wish they'd asked.
That sounds also like political training.
It is. It is. If you have no good answer for a question, say, well, isn't the real point this? Or isn't the fact that you asked that question interesting because it suggests this? And now you can talk about an actual problem. And being prepared to guide the conversation is a very important skill if you want to have conversations that aren't already happening.
That is a superpower that could be used for good or evil.
Yes.
I think it's all being used for one and not the other. Mark.
All powers can be used for good or evil.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
All powers can be used for good or evil. Yeah. And I generally believe that most people who look like they're using their powers for evil are just responding to the cues in their environment.
Their personal narrative.
Yeah. They're doing what they've been rewarded for doing, or what they believe they won't be punished for doing. They may be. Some people are more motivated by avoiding punishment, and some people are motivated by seeking reward. People who are highly reward seeking and to some degree risk seeking go into sales. people who are highly punishment avoiding and to some degree risk minimizing have traditionally gone into IT.
Well, okay.
They have.
That's me.
Well, I mean, the traditional IT person is not rewarded for maximizing the win. They're rewarded for minimizing the breakage and loss. And during the period 2007 to 2017, IT was absolutely being treated as a cost center to be contained. People were saying, oh my gosh, all these money pit projects. It was easy for someone who thought they were being an innovator to be perceived as a bright, shiny object chaser who was costing too much money for the value they returned. You've heard the expression, the productivity paradox, where people said, how come we're spending all this money on IT and it's not getting us anywhere? I've already mentioned Eric Brynjolfsson. He also did some work with Lauren Hitt at University of Pennsylvania, where they looked at companies and discovered the ones who merely aggressively adopted the technology did in fact get quite disappointing results. The one who adopted the technology and also reorganized, decentralized, built new cross-boundary roles and responsibilities with titles like Chief Customer Experience Officer instead of Chief Sales Officer or Chief Marketing Officer, they wound up with substantially greater results. Or reorganizing without the technology, adopting the technology without reorganization, maybe even making things worse, because now you've got additional burdens of adoption and training and stuff without any offsetting gains. But do them both. Do them both, bring in the technology, and then build the organization that can use that technology most effectively. That's where the real wins arise. That's where you get an Uber. That's where you get an Amazon. That's where you get any number of companies and say, wow, how are they doing that? Because they're not trying to do it the way you used to do it with a new tool. They're saying, with this new tool, this is the right way to do it. In fact, someone said, today the challenge is not, how do I function as a bookstore in a world of Amazon? The question that needs to be answered is, in a world of Amazon, what is the function of a bookstore? And then solve that problem. And so now you see there are still bookstores. They hold things like poetry readings. Mm-hmm. They make themselves the preferred homework and study hangout for the high school students, where in towns where maybe the library, due to lack of budget, is only open 3 days a week, whatever.
They all have cafes?
Yeah,
for those
they have the cafes. They say, what do we have that Amazon doesn't have and doesn't try to have? And that's a shrinking list. I mean, I'm in the Seattle area. We've got an Amazon store in the mall. You know, Did you watch the Winter Olympics this year on TV?
First few days.
Did you notice a saturation campaign of ads from Walmart?
Yes.
I saw it digitally.
Did you notice that not a single one of those ads showed someone shopping in a Walmart store? Every single one of those ads showed people in their homes ordering things off their phones and things being dropped off on their doorsteps while the song, "You Can Ring My Bell, Ring My Bell," was playing in the background. It was like it was Amazon with blue boxes and Walmart logos. It was a massive pivot toward the idea that Walmart's not the store. Walmart is the things you need to live your life at the best available price with the minimum possible nuisance. Massive pivot.
Which is what Walmart has been for many, 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 many years. It just happened to be in a brick and mortar format.
Because now the technology to offer that degree of responsive, anticipatory under expectation of what you're going to need and deliver it at scale is now a combination of a rising market expectation and an increasingly viable option. And you know, there's any number of ways to do this, but you have to begin with understanding what's the environment you're in, what's the user expectation you're facing, and what process would you design if you were starting from scratch today, and then how quickly do you get there, given the understandable necessities and realities of installed base and legacy processes and everything else. I don't minimize those, but doing the old thing better at some point becomes doing the wrong thing, and doing the wrong thing, no matter how well you do it, is still doing the wrong thing. Peter Drucker 101. No greater sin than doing the wrong thing more efficiently.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of companies will try to do that because they believe that they don't have the time. We have the time. We barely have the time to institute this new thing. We don't have the time to actually spend to do documentation and training and blah 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 blah.
I got my MBA in 1985, and at that time, the orthodoxies were 1. Japanese Kaizen techniques of relentless incremental improvement, which do not give you transformative breakthroughs, and 2. The Bible the best-selling management book was Peters and Waterman in Search of Excellence, talking about the behaviors of excellent companies. In 1987, Tom Peters wrote another book called Thriving on Chaos. In his preface, he apologizes for In Search of Excellence. This is not well known. Many more people have heard of In Search of Excellence. It's been a TV show. It's been everything. He said, when Bob and I went back and looked at our excellent companies a few years later, we discovered that the ones who were doing what they'd been doing were actually likely to be in severe trouble, and that the ones who had demonstrated the most willingness to change were actually the ones that were still doing well. And you will find Tom Peters quoted in a number of various contexts and various ways of saying it as essentially saying adaptability is the new excellence.
Kind of related, actually. Leonard Nimoy. His first book,
I Am Not Spock. His second book,
I Am Spock.
Exactly right.
And in the introduction, he apologizes for writing I Am Not Spock.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Because he was not adapting to the idea that these fans love him for a reason. Like he was kind of obsessed, like a lot of people who have been on Star Trek are, with the idea that I am not this character.
Mm-hmm.
I am my own person. I have an acting career.
Sure.
But over the years, he had come to realize, you know what? There's a reason that people love this. I did a good job. It was a great character, and I should embrace it.
It never occurred to me to suggest that parallel before, but you're right, because what he did was move from a focus on what he thought his product was, which is Leonard Nimoy, the actor, to an understanding of the experience that he represented, which was the way people wanted to relate to one of his characters.
Exactly.
What a very interesting idea. He did succeed in turning his own perception inside out and looking at himself from the other side, through the other end of the telescope, as it were, to say, what's the experience I've represented to people, not what's the product I want it to be.
Exactly.
That's such a fascinating example. Thank you for bringing it up, and I love the fact that we can have this conversation about something like Star Trek, because when I'm talking about the parallels between our organization and others, I like to look for places where they've made a statement of their organizational values and compare them to our 4 core values and talk about the alignment that we have on dedication to customer success and so on. And then I put up the final element of the slide and with the caption, because we are not the Ferengi, with the beginning of the list of the 271 known rules of acquisition. Number 1 being, once you have their money, you never give it back. And say, that's not the behavior we ever want to represent. We don't think you do either. It's a pleasure to be working with you.
In fact, you could take any quote of any rule of acquisition from any of the shows and say, any of these is probably what you want to avoid.
It really is.
As a practice.
It really is. Yeah, I haven't actually looked at every single one of them. I'm trying to think if there's any one of them that I could actually recommend to someone, and I'm fairly sure that would be hard to do. I think it would be hard to find any Ferengi rule of acquisition that you would actually want to recommend as a business practice.
Well, and there's a difference between Glengarry Glen Ross and then the Salesforce way of doing things. Right?
Yes.
So,
and for those of you who don't recognize that reference, this is the famous Alec Baldwin monologue when he comes into the room full of real estate salespeople and talks about ABC, always be closing, and talks about attention.
Everything else. Yeah.
What's the other one? Something interest attention.
I don't remember.
So, there are several. There are a couple of acronyms he uses: ABC, always be closing, and interest, attention, and that's the famous the famous one. First prize is the Cadillac. Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you get to keep your job. There's 4 people in the room.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and yeah, it's a devastating one. The other one that I often commend to people is a clip that's out there from the movie. I think it's Boiler Room, in which an experienced broker played by Vin Diesel is demonstrating the art of the cold phone call to the younger brokers. And so we cut back and forth between what's happening in the stock exchange room and the dentist that they've called. And he orchestrates the noise in the room to suggest there's this amazing demand for this stock this dentist has never heard of. And then says... And then he gets the dentist interested. And then the key line, well, I'm sorry, I can only give you 1,000 shares. 1,000 shares? Blah, 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 blah. And at the end, the dentist is saying, why can you only give me 1,000? And I've shown this to all my kids. I'm saying, if you ever get a phone call from someone flogging a stock, I want you to be able to visualize what's happening at the other end of the phone through this lens. Because this notion of you cannot allow yourself to wind up with that soda straw view of specifications, price, and delivery, and lose sight of, wait a minute, what's the actual problem I'm solving? What's the actual context in which I'm operating? What's the culture within which this solution has to work? Because ultimately that's what's going to decide whether you succeed or fail.
And incidentally, going back to an earlier conversation you had, Vin Diesel, huge D&D player.
How interesting.
His tattoo on his chest is actually his first character's name.
I had no idea. I'm convinced that he's having a lot of fun playing characters who are nowhere near as smart as he is. Yeah. The people I know, and having spent 36 years in the LA area, my kids went to school with the kids of people who you would recognize on TV, and they are all the ones who've had any professional success at all are really cool, really interesting, and really smart people, regardless of whatever characters they've been playing. Yeah, right. And there's a point here, which is that all of us, to some extent, when we go into a room, need to be conscious of who do people think is walking into the room. Do they think I'm walking in here as a techie? Do they think I'm walking in here as a unrealistic, futuristic-oriented visionary? Do they think I'm walking in here as just some admin who should barely be allowed in the room, let alone allowed to sit at the big table? You really do need to be prepared to understand that every day you show up at work is a piece of performance art to some extent, and deciding who you are that day and how you're going to prove that that's who you are. This isn't about not being authentic. It's about understanding what aspect of your authenticity you need to present that day. It's like deciding what you're going to wear,
Peter, as a man who has for years worn a wizard hat with old Salesforce logos,
the notion that you've decided how to present yourself is kind of apparent, isn't it? Yeah,
right. And I can honestly tell you this, that the perception change from going from I'm here as an admin to being I am here and I'm actually a performing artist because I've just put on a stupid wizard hat, it makes a difference. I could draw a line. I can say, when have executives taken me more seriously? When I came in my suit and tie, or when I came in my suit and tie and wearing a wizard hat with Salesforce logos on it? And it's always been the latter, where they first go, what the heck is this guy doing? They listen to me, and then they realize this person actually knows what they're talking about, and then the meeting just moves on and progresses.
And this changes over time. I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine talking about maybe early to mid-1980s when IBM PCs were just starting to show up in offices. And he was an engineer at an aerospace company, and someone came in with a question, and they were talking about it, and my friend said, wait a minute, and turned to his keyboard and started punching something in. I think it was Lotus 123 or something. And he told me later that the moment his fingers touched the key, the first clack of a key, he could feel the respect drain out, because all of a sudden he wasn't a peer, he was someone who keyboarded and couldn't, and immediately it was like he had suddenly rebranded himself as being a member of an inferior caste. There were not keyboards in executives' offices back then. When I was at Exxon, I did handwritten drafts of documents and occasionally dictated recordings, and there were two people whose job was to type for me, bring me stuff. I would mark things up. They would maybe fix it with liquid paper, or maybe with a mag card typewriter, make some corrections and retype it. I didn't touch a keyboard in the office until 1984. Having been out of school for 6 years, the first time I needed to touch a keyboard was 6 years after graduation, when all of a sudden Lotus 123 became a thing. And being able to do that, people actually would ask me things like, I'm sorry, are you a wizard? And they weren't meaning it sarcastically, and the fact that you used the wizard hat. There was a period in the late 1980s when being someone with technical chops who could make a computer do stuff was a halo. It was a rare combination of people who could competently type, could make a computer do things without needing to call tech support, but also knew what they wanted it to do. And now, we kind of expect that. In fact, I can tell you how crisp the transition was, and pardon me if you've heard this story before, but when I was in high school, in our chemistry class, the last test we took before Christmas vacation was slide rule, because they didn't want to have to keep cooking the problems to make them mathematically easy to do for the whole year, but they couldn't assume that we could afford calculators. So every student was expected to prove that they could use a slide rule, because that was going to be something you would need to get through the rest of the year. Okay, so that would have been 1973. Okay? In 1975, I'm at MIT, and the differential equations class includes, in an entire semester, one lecture on numerical methods where you just crunch the hell out of something with an iterative routine on a computer because the exact solution isn't tractable. It was a tiny little sprinkle of the class. And to do the problem set for that lecture, you signed up for a half hour on the programmable calculator in the resource center, because of course you couldn't be expected to own such a thing. Following year, the calculator I had was bigger, slower, and twice the price of the one that my wife, that year a freshman, had. The course was called Differential Equations and Numerical Methods. Numerical methods were maybe a third of the content because they're tremendously powerful, and it was casually assumed that every student owned a programmable calculator. I guess 30 years later, when our son is at MIT, every student is not merely assumed to own a programmable calculator, they're assumed to own a laptop computer, which would have been considered a supercomputer-grade machine when we were there, and they were using MATLAB software, which was only something my wife ever got to use as a fully blown engineer, before. That's how the transition was that crisp of a matter of small, 3 years from slide rules to programmable calculators. But then add a few more decades, every student is assumed to own what would have been considered a supercomputer grade machine. And that's the level at which you have to be prepared to contribute. Well, ask yourself in how many industries, and this is something Peter Schwartz has said, you won't be replaced by AI. You will be replaced by someone who knows how to use it. And USA Bank CIO said the big mistake is that we allow people to use AI to mean artificial intelligence, which sounds like replacing people. It means that people expect too much of it and fear too much from it. If we call it augmentation of intelligence, the expectation is more reasonable, and it seems more like it's there to make you more valuable instead of to replace you. And so we eliminate one of the biggest negatives of excessive hype and one of the other biggest negatives of excessive fear by saying it's augmentation of intelligence. And interestingly, Doug Engelbart, whose name is best known as having been the inventor of the mouse and the first person ever to demonstrate a multi-windowed interface in public a long time ago, used that term, augmentation of intellect, as what he thought this was going to be all about. And he was so right, and we need to rediscover that very, very quickly if we want the conversation about AI to be more constructive and less disappointing and frightening simultaneously to so many people.
How are
by demonstration? By demonstration. I mean, look.
Using the term.
Well, look, like using it, yes, but look at the way Einstein Insights works. It doesn't replace you. It says, this is what I'm suggesting to you, and this is why. And you get to look at that. You can be educated by it, or you can say, oh, gosh, yeah, that's a dumb machine finding a correlation that has no predictive power. Stop using that in your predictions. The person's always in charge. The machine is making suggestions, making informed suggestions, doing feats of pattern recognition that are, really powerful compared to what an unaided human being can do. But the person's always in charge. And I think that's one of the reasons that Einstein is going to work and why it is genuinely different this time is that, number one, it's informed by the data it observes in an environment that's very data rich. The old AI required humans to write rules that they hoped captured what they were doing. The new AI can measure what people are actually doing and find patterns in that, which is a much more powerful and scalable model. And two, the way we present it is not as an opaque black box that you either trust or don't, but as an aid to your work that makes suggestions, does lead scoring, makes predictions, but always is working to enable you to do a better job, not to take your job away. I think that's a really important aspect of the way we're bringing Einstein as a label and as an idea into the marketplace.
Thank you very much, Peter. Always a pleasure.
I never know what I think until people ask. It's a Schrodinger's cat thing. When you open the box, you find out the cat's alive or dead. I actually don't know what's in my head until people open the box, and then we all find out together. So these conversations, I always wind up learning from them because I say, oh, okay, yeah, that's why that thing's been gnawing at me. The act of having to answer the question forces me to construct connections in my head that then become quite useful. So I appreciate the time you guys have spent helping me figure out what I think.
It's emergent communication.
Okay, I guess I was there. WizardCast is produced by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, directed by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, technical administration by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, script writing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, audio editing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, website maintenance by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, and our intern this episode was Karen Rivera.
And you can be an intern too. Just follow us at WizardCast_pod on Twitter.
Or just come up to us during Salesforce events and then tweet about us so we remember to add you to the list.
Send us your interview suggestions, jokes, videos, tips, and feedback to wizardcast@thewizardnews.com or head over to thewizardnews.com and click Contact WizardCast.
And we need to hear from you. If you could ask Parker Harris one question, what would it be?
Submit a question by going to bit.ly/ParkerQuestions and fill out our short form.
And eventually we're going to do another idea exchange highlight. As a matter of fact, it's probably coming up pretty soon. So what ideas do you want to know about that you all maybe just want to hear us talk about?
Or you want to have those ideas shared to all the listeners so that they might go vote on them. Go to bit.ly/idea highlight to submit that idea to us sooner rather than later. That's going to be coming up soon.
Really appreciate it. I mean, especially if you want my mother to vote for the idea. Don't forget to subscribe to the WizardCast and receive our next episode automatically.
And please post reviews on Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, and share this episode. It helps others to hear what you just had to endure.
Once again, I'm Brian. Hi, Mom.
And I'm moving past the bad jokes in this episode.
Thanks for listening, Steve. Didn't I do that last time?
No, you didn't. I cut it out.
Did you?
I did.
I don't remember.
It wasn't in the final version. I cut it out.
Well, thanks for listening, Steve.
Wait, who's Steve?
Well, Steven's technically my father-in-law, but, I'm really talking about the Steve that's currently sitting in his car listening to this.
Oh, that's Steve?
He should really be paying attention to the road.
Yeah, look where you're going, Steve. You're going to cause a wreck.
And I know they say 5 miles over the limit is always acceptable, but come on.
I usually go about 7.
You outlaw, you.